South Africa has witnessed some of the biggest political scandals in modern African history. Over the past 2 decades, billions of rand have been lost through corruption, fraud, and abuse of public funds. Some scandals led to criminal investigations. Others resulted in court rulings, official commissions of inquiry, and the resignation of senior government officials. Today, we are counting down the six biggest corruption scandals in South Africa since 2000, ranking them from number six to number one based on their political impact, financial cost, and the lasting effect on the country. Coming in at number six is the Digital Vibes scandal. In 2020, South Africa was fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. During this difficult time, the National Department of Health awarded communications contracts worth around 150 million rand to a company called Digital Vibes. The company was hired to help communicate important public health information, but concerns quickly emerged about how the contracts had been awarded. The Special Investigating Unit, also known as the SIU, launched an investigation. According to its findings, procurement rules had not been properly followed. The SIU also found evidence suggesting that people connected to then Health Minister Zweli Mkhize benefited financially from the contracts. Although Mkhize denied wrongdoing, the growing controversy placed enormous pressure on the government. In August 2021, he resigned as Minister of Health. The SIU recommended that money be recovered and referred aspects to the case for possible criminal investigation. The scandal damaged public confidence because it happened during a national health emergency when every public rand was expected to help save lives. At number five is the Palapala Farm controversy. In June 2022, former State Security Agency Director General Arthur Fraser made allegations involving President Cyril Ramaphosa and a theft that allegedly occurred at a president's Palapala game farm. According to the allegations, a large amount of foreign currency, widely reported to be about 580,000 US dollars, had been hidden inside furniture before it was stolen. The controversy quickly became one of the country's biggest political stories. Investigations focused on several important questions. Was the foreign currency properly declared? Were all legal reporting requirements followed? And were state resources improperly used after the theft? Several institutions became involved, including Parliament, the South African Reserve Bank, the Public Protector, and law enforcement agencies. The matter has remained politically and legally significant through multiple investigations and court proceedings. While different institutions reached different conclusions on various aspects of the case, the controversy continues to influence South African politics. At number four is the VBS Mutual Bank scandal. Unlike many corruption cases involving only politicians, this scandal directly affected ordinary people. VBS Mutual Bank had built a reputation as a community bank, serving many lower income customers. But behind the scenes, investigators later uncovered one of South Africa's biggest banking fraud schemes. In 2018, the South African Reserve Bank placed VBS under curatorship after discovering serious financial problems. An independent forensic investigation titled The Great Bank Heist revealed how senior executives and their associates allegedly looted nearly 2 billion rand from the bank through fraudulent loans, fake transactions, and illegal payments. The investigation also found that several municipalities had illegally invested public money in VBS despite laws prohibiting such investments. When the bank collapsed, many ordinary depositors lost their savings. Municipalities also lost public funds that were intended for essential community services. Several executives were arrested and later convicted. Others continue to face legal proceedings. The VBS scandal became a powerful reminder that corruption is not just about politicians. It can also destroy financial institutions and hurt ordinary citizens who had nothing to do with wrongdoing. Coming in at number three is the Nkandla scandal. In 2009, major upgrades began at then President Jacob Zuma's private home in Nkandla, KwaZulu-Natal. The government said many of the improvements were necessary for presidential security. However, questions soon emerged about the scale and cost of the project. Public spending eventually reached approximately 246 million rand. Investigations by the public protector found that several features, including swimming pools, cattle enclosure, amphitheater, and visitors center, went beyond legitimate security requirements. The public protector concluded that President Zuma had benefited unduly from some of the upgrades and should repay a reasonable portion of the costs. The dispute eventually reached the South Africa's Constitutional Court. In 2016, the court unanimously ruled that President Zuma had failed to uphold, defend, and respect the Constitution by ignoring the public protector's remedial action. The court ordered him to repay part of the money. The judgment became one of the most important constitutional rulings in South African history. It reinforced the independence of constitutional institutions and demonstrated that even the country's highest elected officials remained subject to the law. But while Nkandla dominated headlines for years, an even bigger scandal had already begun to unfold, one that would eventually expose widespread corruption across the entire government. And that brings us to number two, the Strategic Defense Arms Deal. In 1999, South Africa signed one of the largest procurement agreements in its democratic history, purchasing military equipment worth around 30 billion rand from several international arms manufacturers. Although the contracts were signed before 2000, the investigations, court cases, and political consequences dominated South African politics throughout the next 2 decades. Almost immediately, allegations surfaced that politicians and government officials had received bribes and kickbacks from international defense companies. One of the central figures was Jacob Zuma, who was then deputy president. His financial advisor, Shabir Shaik, was convicted in 2004 for corruption and fraud after the court found that he had maintained a corrupt relationship with Zuma. The conviction ultimately led to Zuma's dismissal as deputy president by then President Thabo Mbeki. Over the years, multiple investigations, legal battles, and commissions examined different aspects of the arms deal. The controversy shaped the South African politics for more than 20 years and laid the foundation for many of the corruption concerns that would later emerge during the state capture era. And finally, at number one, is the biggest corruption scandal in South African history, state capture. No other scandal has had a greater impact on South Africa's government, economy, and public institutions. Between roughly 2009 and 2018, evidence emerged that members of the Gupta family had built extensive relationships with powerful political leaders and senior government officials. According to evidence later presented before the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, commonly known as the Zondo Commission, the Guptas and their associates influenced the appointments, secured lucrative government contracts, and benefited from widespread corruption involving several state-owned enterprises. Institutions including Eskom, Transnet, Denel, South African Airways, PRASA, and other government entities became central to the investigation. The Zondo Commission had testimony from nearly 300 witnesses over several years and produced thousands of pages of findings. Its reports described how corruption and political interference weakened public institutions, damaged governance, and contributed to enormous financial losses. Although estimates differ, economists and investigators agree that the economic damage reached hundreds of billions of rand. The consequences extended far beyond financial losses. Frequent power shortages, declining investor confidence, weakened state institutions, and reduced the public trust became some of the lasting effects associated with the state capture period. Following the Commission's findings, multiple criminal investigations, prosecutions, and asset recovery efforts continue. Several former executives, politicians, and business figures have faced legal action. while authorities continue pursuing additional cases. More than any other scandal in South Africa's democratic history, state capture changed how the country views corruption, accountability, and the importance of protecting independent institutions. These six scandals tell the story of how corruption can affect every part of a nation, from hospitals and banks to government departments and state owned companies. They also show why independent courts, investigative journalists, law enforcement agencies, and oversight institutions remain essential in holding public officials accountable. As South Africa continues working to recover stolen funds and strengthen its institutions, these cases remain powerful reminders that transparency, accountability, and the rule of law are critical to protecting democracy.